Hi there, this is Chetan. This is our first exercise in this particular section, which is networking in AWS, and we will start with a basic networking assignment, and then slowly we'll move to the more advanced assignments. So as you might already be aware of what is VPC and what are subnets, and you might have already launched an EC2 instance in say default VPC which Amazon creates, but in this particular exercise what we want to do is create our own VPC, and then we need to have one public subnet inside VPC, and then we'll launch one EC2 instance which would have a public IP, and we will connect to this EC2 instance from our workstation. Okay, so some preparation for this we need to do. The steps would be like creating a VPC in given region, then creating internet gateway, attaching it to the VPC. The next step should be to create a subnet with the CIDR range what you prefer, and to make this subnet public subnet, we will create one route table and add an route for internet traffic which flows through the internet gateway, and then we will also set up auto assign public IP setting on this public subnet, so that the EC2 instance which we launched inside this subnet will get automatic public IP. And then we will connect over SSH because we will be launching Amazon Linux EC2 instance. Okay, so we are all set to go. Here are the steps which I have just put in there in the slides. You can just go through the steps and can try yourself, or you can follow me the way I am doing. Okay, so always remember, whenever you want to design your network, the first thing you should do is probably draw a nice network diagram, something like this, maybe with pen and paper, that is sufficient, and then just look at the diagram and go on creating your infrastructure. Okay, so here let's do that. Let's go to Amazon console and let's go to the VPC console. I have one default VPC which Amazon has already created for me. I'm working in Mumbai region. You might work in the region that you want to. So the first step we are doing is creating a VPC. So let's do that. Create a VPC. You can give any name like my VPC, and you can give any CIDR range like this 10.200.0.0/16 and just create. As soon as you create your VPC, the next thing you should do is create internet gateway. So for this exercise we are not going to use VPC wizard which comes here when you go to the VPC dashboard. Don't use this. We are going to create individual components one by one. Okay, so as I told, let's do the next thing. Create an internet gateway and give some meaningful name, which so that we can associate this with the VPC, and just create it. Okay, internet gateway has been attached, has been created. The next we need to attach this to our VPC, so let's do that. Okay, now if you go back to the diagram, we have created VPC with this CIDR range, and we created internet gateway and attach it to the VPC. The next thing we should do is create a public subnet. So let's do that. Let's go to the subnets and create a subnet. Maybe you can call it my VPC public, and select your VPC. Select any of these two AZs. In Mumbai there are only two AZs. In your region you might find more than two AZs, so you can select any of those availability zone. And then we need to select a CIDR range. Typically I prefer creating CIDR range with prefix 24, which makes my subnet to be of size 256. So I'm using the first available CIDR range, which is 10.200.0.0/24. Okay, subnet has been created. We also need to create a route table, otherwise the subnet is associated with the VPC's main route table, but we don't want to modify main route table, we want to create our own route table. Okay, let's do that. Let's go to the route table, create a route table, say my VPC public route table, selecting our VPC, create it. Now by default this route table is not associated with any of the subnets, and it has just one default route, which is a local route for routing the traffic within the VPC. But what we want is we want to add a route for the internet, and let's do that by adding this entry 000/0, and let's have a target as internet gateway. Okay, that's done. And as I said, this route table is currently not associated with our subnet, so let's do that. Associate this route table with the subnets. Now edit this and you will find this subnet which we had created. Just select that subnet and save. Okay, so whatever we have shown here is completed. One last thing we need to do is we need to set up a subnet level property, auto assign public IP, so that when we launch EC2 instance in this subnet, it automatically receives a public IP as well. Okay, so we are done with all the VPC settings. Now let's move to EC2, where we are going to launch our EC2 instance. I assume you might already have an SSH key pair created for your account. If not, you should go to the key pairs and create one of the key pair for you, where Amazon keeps the public key and returns you the private key. So I already have my keys created, and I'll be using existing key for this instance. So let's go to the instance and launch our first instance. You can select the first AMI, select an instance type T2 micro, and on this page we have to select in which VPC we want to launch and in which subnet. Currently there is only one subnet, so it will in the drop down show just one subnet. And we also need a public IP which has been enabled by default. This is because we had enabled auto assign public IP for the subnet. Okay, rest of the things we are not concerned. Let's go ahead, say add storage. Let's keep it default. Add tags. You should always add some meaningful name for your EC2 instance. So let's call it, say, public EC2. And the next thing is security group. So we'll say it's my public security group. You can give any meaningful name that you want. And as you know, I want to connect to this instance from my workstation over port 22, that is SSH port. So let's do that, and here I can say my IP instead of 0000, because it will then only allow me to connect to this EC2 instance from my this workstation. Okay, just review and launch, where it will ask for an SSH key, and from this drop down I am selecting one of my key. Just launch an instance. Okay, cool. So we launched one EC2 instance, and if you see, this instance has a private IP and also a public IP, and for connecting to this instance from the internet we need this public IP. So let's wait for a couple of seconds till the time instance is running. Yes, it is running. Let's grab it public IP and try to connect over SSH. I'm not sure which operating system you are using locally, but I am using Windows here, and in that case I will be using Putty software to connect to this EC2 instance over SSH. So let's do that. Let's open an Putty and put this IP address. You also need to load your SSH key through here, browse and load the PPK. You need an PPK format if you are using Putty as your SSH client. If you have any Linux based SSH client, then you need a PEM file which Amazon returns you when you create SSH key pair. So I'm using this PPK file. I'm loading this file and just opening the connection. There is a warning which I will accept, and by default the login for this Amazon Linux EC2 instance is EC2-user, and you see I could successfully connect to my instance. Okay, so that was the very first assignment where we connected to our EC2 instance in a public subnet, and we launched it in non-default VPC. If any one of you are using a Linux based local system, then probably you need to use a console or a terminal to log into this same EC2 instance. In that case, you must have your key file present. I have my same key file but with the PEM format, and what you can do SSH -i, load your key, ec2-user and a public IP. You accept the warning and you get into this instance. Okay, so that's it. If you could do this, you just completed your first exercise in networking in VPC. So feel free to go to the next lecture. Thank you.